For the Minnesota Star Tribune, I'm Melissa Townsend, and I'm here with three people: Liz Sawyer, Louis Krause, and Sophia Barnett. They're all reporters at the Minnesota Star Tribune, and they've been covering the deployment of ICE and Border Patrol agents across the metro. Hey guys, thanks for being here.
Hi. Thanks for having us.
Hello.
You may have been trying to follow every detail about what's happening with ICE and Border Control in Minnesota, or you may have just turned the whole thing off because it is just too much. So we're here today to take a step back. We want to put things into context and talk about what may be coming up next. I'm basically focusing on three different stories that have happened in the last 3 months: November, December, and January. There was ICE activity and Border Patrol activity well before then, but this is when things really ramped up in the metro. So let's start in November. Louis, you were at one of the first pretty sizable raids, and it was in St. Paul.
It's been eye-opening. I hadn't seen that before with these military gear-clad agents.
I have a recording of that scene, but set that up for us. What was going on that day?
So we just got a notification that agents were staging in a park in St. Paul, and I go there and they've left already. And then it turned out they were going to this cleaning product company, and the agents had it closed off, and they took about a dozen or so people from there. And so that was kind of the start of all of this, it felt like to me.
You spoke with a young man at the scene that day who also arrived after getting a call about the raid.
Were you able to go inside, or were you just hearing from your family about who they took?
I got a call at 9:27 from both my mom and my dad saying that they had came in and grabbed some of our family members that are inside.
Okay. And they say why they were there? Were there any criminal activity that you knew of going on in there?
I just want to pause here for a second because this is a video that you took. And at this moment in the video, he looks at you like, "Are you kidding me?" And then this is his response.
If working in this country is a crime, then God forbid these people are criminals. But everyone in here has worked for more than 20 years. My mom started working here in 1999. This was her first job.
And I know it's difficult. I'm sorry. Who all did they take that you knew? It was your cousin or your uncle?
My cousin, my uncle. My mom has known these people for 20 years. Great people. When I was sick, everyone was helping my mom with every situation. Everyone helped my mom in the toughest time of our lives. Yeah.
Okay. And how old are you?
24.
24. And are you a St. Paul resident? Or?
I'm a Minneapolis resident.
Okay.
Louis, what was the emotion of that moment? What do you remember from that?
I feel like I've gone to a lot of these crime scenes, and I've sometimes talked with people who I don't really buy what they're telling me sometimes. Whereas this kid, you could tell that his whole family was shaken up by this and that he was going to have such a drastic impact. And that's kind of what leads to the protesters smashing the windows and pushing the agents, and the agents pushing them back.
So what you're saying is it is that level of emotion that ratchets it up the whole crowd who's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Everyone was feeling that. You could just see the looks on their face of how sad they were for everyone. There were family members of his up in the window yelling and crying as well, unsure if they were going to make it out of that building too.
You also spoke to a woman who was in the crowd observing and protesting.
To get here, we all have to do what we did. We all have to show up when we get the text, when we get the call, get on the list. We have these phones now. We have these awesome phones now where we can get the communication. Show up here. These people are here with their little letters on their little hats and their little vests. Show up.
Yeah, definitely a lot of emotion. The only people on that scene that I think you didn't talk to are the ICE officers. What's the deal with that?
There was one at the Brotex raid who briefly spoke with me, and he would only say that we're conducting a criminal operation.
And that's it.
And that's it. Other than that, they just don't talk to me. When I talked to that one, I said, "Can I get your name?" He said, "We can't give you our names."
Sophia, you've been on the ground. Is that also your experience?
I mean, we've tried so many times to get their point of view. Every week I ask to ride along with ICE agents. Every week. I've done this for 5 weeks now, and I have not gotten a single response. I mean, if they would talk to us, we would like to hear what they have to say.
Now, ICE officials say that they are arresting criminals. But that young man whose family was taken said nobody on the scene had committed a crime. Did you look into that?
They gave us the name of one man that was being sought after for some kind of violence-related charge. But I think some of them were released.
Liz?
It's part of what's contributing so much to the fear on the ground, because the Trump administration months back said that they were targeting the, quote, worst of the worst, people with extensive violent histories. And they are not providing a list of the folks that they say that they are arresting.
Yeah, it is basically your job as reporters, right, to verify what the government says, no matter which administration it is. On the Department of Homeland Security website, which is the federal agency that oversees ICE and Border Patrol, there's a long list of press releases, and each one they're identifying how they have arrested the worst of the worst, right? You've probably seen this, and they have pictures of people, and they have a list of their alleged crimes. Have you been able to verify that?
Yeah, so I've been over the records building a lot, searching these names that they put out for worst of the worst.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to check if they're in other states convicted of something. Yeah. For some of them, they are bad, as they say. Some of them have sometimes sex abuse of minors. Sometimes there were some that were very minor seeming, just maybe one conviction for driving under the influence. Some of the people in that database are just undocumented. I kind of find it interesting, too, just from the standpoint of these are people who many were convicted already and served a prison sentence and now are being deported with a focus on them because of those past convictions. But there's some that aren't showing up at all. There's some of these people who they say they have these charges, but there's no evidence of that in the court records.
Oh. So that was story number 1 in November. Now, when we look at December, something new rolled out. Sophia, you've been covering this.
Yeah, so December 1st, the Trump administration launched Operation Metro Surge, which was a targeted operation in the Twin Cities where a huge influx of ICE agents descended into the Twin Cities. And that's when we really started to see immigration enforcement ramp up. Because I'm a reporter and have been covering this, I'm in a ton of group chats and channels with hundreds of organizers, and it just started blowing up constantly, every second. Right now, I feel my phone vibrating because I am getting notifications from these channels. And it was much, much slower. And then middle of December, things started really ramping up.
And what are the messages telling you?
The messages are like, there is a kidnapping, there is an abduction at XYZ location in Robbinsdale and in St. Paul, and they're for people who can get there and be an observer, be a protester, be a community member who's watching and witnessing what's happening. And it's just nonstop.
Yeah. And we talk about the observers being protesters / observers. What's the difference?
So a legal observer usually is somebody who is trained and is particularly there to not intervene. So they're not supposed to be jeering at ICE officers. They're not supposed to be putting themselves in the way of any ICE agents. They are supposed to be there to film, to record for evidence purposes, to make sure that if something bad were to happen, like what we saw a couple of days ago, there is video, there is proof, there is something that can provide information about what actually happened in a way that can't be argued with.
Liz?
I mean, the lines get blurred pretty frequently, though, because you have protesters who do film for long stretches of time, sometimes hours on a live stream, but you can also hear them jeering at the ICE officers as well.
Sophia, with ICE activity ramping up in December, how are things changing on the ground with the observers and protesters?
Something that I've noticed, particularly over the last month, is that these encounters have become increasingly aggressive. Not only are there more ICE agents in Minneapolis, but there are just more escalated incidents with them. Like, there are people who I have seen be thrown to the ground, body slammed, tackled, sprayed with chemical irritants for standing and filming.
And that brings us to the story of Susan Tincher, story number 2. Louis, you have those details.
Mm-hmm. I believe it was a Latino man who was being arrested in North Minneapolis. And this was early in the morning. And a white neighbor of his, Susan Tincher, a 55-year-old woman, went out to film it. And the video shows her being tackled and arrested. The DHS was alleging he was trying to break through a security perimeter, assaulting an agent. None of this was seen on any video. And a lot of her neighbors are like, we don't buy that at all. They're saying she's this just sweet older lady.
Local TV station Care 11 carried her story, and here's part of their report.
Susan Tincher said she arrived at the raid at Oliver and 21st Avenues around 6 this morning and was asked by an agent who she was, and the agent told her to back up. She says she refused.
And I stood my ground. I just stood there on the sidewalk, and other officers came up, and I was thrown to the ground, tightly handcuffed, put in an unmarked truck, and driven.
So she was driven to the Whipple building, which is the ICE HQ right now. And in a separate news conference, she described what happened to her there.
I was put in shackles. I was held for 5 hours. Some of my clothing was cut off, and my wedding ring was cut from my finger. And I'm upset about those things, too.
Louis, you look surprised.
That was shocking to hear that they had to cut her wedding ring off.
I know. What is that about?
Seems pretty excessive.
I've never heard of anything like that before.
Yeah.
Not sure why they couldn't take it off.
And why would she have to take it off? I mean, maybe, I don't know. I want to talk about this for a minute. Okay, so she was taken into custody, basically, it sounds like, because they told her to move and she didn't. Now, what is her responsibility when it comes to listening to law enforcement? And what is her right to stand on the sidewalk when she's been asked to move? Like, can you guys clarify this?
I mean, I think it depends if she's really close to where agents are arresting someone or working.
Mm-hmm.
It could also very well just be the agents just want her to move because they're mad that she's there yelling and they're telling her to move backwards.
And how would this work, Liz, if this was a police officer telling her to move and she didn't?
Well, I mean, the Supreme Court has affirmed that citizens have a right to film law enforcement, and it sounds like she was on a public sidewalk. It is true, though, that we are supposed to listen to law enforcement direction. However, there's a lot of discretion. All the videos I've seen, and even in talking to local law enforcement, they are far more aggressive. And there are things that they do that local law enforcement would never do. And if they did, they would be reprimanded for them or potentially criminally charged. I mean, there was a scene where a federal agent pulled their firearm and pointed it directly at the head of a protester who was standing there with their arms down, just yelling, just exercising their First Amendment right. That's a use of force under policy of local law enforcement. They would have to write a report for that.
Okay, so the local police wouldn't do this. And if they did do it, there might even be some consequences or something that a citizen could do to hold the officer accountable. Is there anything like that?
Their best avenue is a civil lawsuit. But the Trump administration has gutted the DOJ's Civil Rights Department. And so there aren't nearly as many avenues for accountability against federal officers.
I will also say after a Google search, there appears to be one way that you can report ICE misconduct, and it's through DHS, and it's through the Office of Inspector General. That's where you're supposed to report a complaint if you have that, and it's through the Department of Homeland Security.
Yeah, so you have to go complain to the agency that is actually harassing you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. That incident with Ms. Tincher prompted Governor Walz to write a letter to Kristi Noem, head of Homeland Security, and he wrote, "Residents who document law enforcement activity, including immigration enforcement, play an essential role in transparency, accountability, and safeguarding the civil liberties of all Minnesota." This is in December. And he went on to say, detaining citizens for exercising these rights sends a deeply disturbing signal about how these very rights are being eroded. And we confirmed with a spokesman for Governor Walz that he did not get a response from DHS on that letter. But in a separate statement, Assistant Secretary McLaughlin at the Department of Homeland Security said this: obstructing law enforcement is not protesting. It is a crime. Instead of trying to spread misinformation, Tim Walz should focus on protecting American lives and thanking the brave men and women of DHS law enforcement who are risking their lives to make communities in his state safer. But it was almost like with that letter, Governor Walz was basically ringing the alarm, like something bad could really happen here.
I mean, all of our local and state officials have been worried about this outcome since the very beginning. The sheer number of agents here and the number of interactions, the risk exponentially goes up. But it's really not a surprise that he didn't get a response. There's so much bad blood between our government officials and the federal Trump administration and Trump himself. So,
yeah. Can we detour to that for a minute? I mean,
Well, I think it's clear that Trump definitely has a bone to pick with Walz. I mean, obviously, as a somewhat former opponent, there's that history that seems to be very clearly still bothering him. And I think also Jacob Frey has become a really popular figure as an elected official because he is so staunchly anti-ICE and is responding in this like viral way where he
throw in the F-bomb.
throws in the F-bomb and says, ICE, get the F out of Minneapolis. And people loved that. People loved that he was taking a strong stance. He had an op-ed in the New York Times where he also took a strong stance.
I mean, it's hard to untangle all the recent allegations of fraud in Minnesota. But all of that is swirling at exactly the same time. He's making pronouncements about sending more auditors to our state at the same time that he's sending immigration agents. And so there's just a lot of focus on Minnesota right now from the federal government, and none of it is good.
Yeah, full scale. So it's now January 2026, and earlier this month, right after the new year, things changed again. That's when there was another announcement from Homeland Security saying they were going to increase the number of agents even further.
Yeah. So on January 4th, people started talking. Different journalists, different reporters were sort of getting word from sources that there was going to be this influx that we've seen that has been confirmed to be 2,000 agents, at least confirmed by DHS.
Liz, put that into perspective for us. Like 2,000 new ICE and Border Patrol agents.
I was just going to say, a lot of American cities have seen crackdowns and an influx of immigration agents, hundreds of people. But what we've seen this week, 2,000 agents come to Minnesota, and primarily in the Twin Cities area, is a massive number for a mid-sized city like Minneapolis. To give you an idea, that is roughly twice as many officers as we have with the Minneapolis Police Department and the Hennepin County Sheriff's deputies on the street at any given time. And they are going everywhere. We're talking about daycares, schools, private businesses, public stretches of streets like Lake Street. We're seeing a lot of activity. My husband was at Great Clips the other day getting a haircut, and employees had informed him that ICE agents had been there hours earlier.
And I think also something that's interesting to note, and of course this is coming from DHS, so we have not been able to independently verify this.
Department of Homeland Security.
Yes, exactly. As of December 19th, they said nearly 700 arrests have been made under Operation Metro Surge, which is very high.
Yeah. And arrests meaning like they could bring in somebody and then release them, which they are doing. So we don't know if those are the worst of the worst as they are listing or who the heck that is.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that U.S. citizens are also being detained. Like yesterday, a young man who was detained, a member of the Red Lake Nation, and he was being followed by ICE agents. He called his aunt. He pulled into a Hy-Vee parking lot in Robbinsdale, and they were asking for his identification. He was fumbling around to get his identification, and they said, take your hands out of your pockets. And they punched him. There is a video of him being punched. It is uploaded to social media accounts and has been verified by the Star Tribune. And he was not even given the opportunity to present his identification because he was being assaulted by these ICE agents. And this is not an isolated incident. Like, citizens are stopped on the regular now asked for their identification, and some are detained. He was in a holding cell in Whipple with 3 other citizens who were detained.
Now, I know DHS officials have not made a statement addressing the arrests of legal citizens who are not protesting, but we did see a statement from Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin again, who said those who are not here illegally and who are not breaking other laws have nothing to fear. But based on what we're seeing on the ground, that's not totally true. Legal citizens are being detained.
We had a Somali man who was seen coming out of a building in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood, and the agents just immediately booked it towards him, tackled him in the snow, and didn't bother to check for his identification. And he was just released later that day with no charges.
Liz, you talk with a lot of local law enforcement. What are they saying?
You've seen the Minneapolis Police Chief, Brian O'Hara, come out very strongly. I mean, one of the most vocal in the entire country in terms of law enforcement officials railing against ICE and their tactics. A number of officers I've spoken to say this would be a lot less chaotic if there was more transparency from the federal government, and if you weren't going after people who very clearly are not violent, don't have long criminal histories, and are obviously U.S. citizens.
So with this ramp up in the number of agents on the ground, how did that change protests? How did that change what you're seeing on the streets, Sophia?
I think it definitely escalated things. I mean, now just constant sound, constant whistling, and people shouting in megaphones, and just more people than I've seen in previous protests over the last few months. And I think, like, when Renee Good was shot, I mean, the amount of people, the sound was just so loud, and it was just whistling, shouting.
Yeah. Let's talk about story number 3. ICE agent Jonathan Ross shot and killed an observer, Renee Good. We learned that she was a 37-year-old white woman, a mother of 3. Liz, who in the newsroom found out about the shooting first? Do you remember?
Our colleague Andy Mannix got a text from a source, and things were starting to bubble online. So the 3 of us actually all ran out to the scene. Bystanders were still out in their yards, sort of trying to interpret what they had seen. There was a growing crowd of protesters and bystanders, and it was very much anticipated that Miss Good had died long before it was confirmed from the hospital, because what people saw was how long it took for EMS to get to her body, get custody of her from law enforcement, and make it to the hospital.
I don't want to play the recording of the shooting, but I do want to play the recording of something that happened right after. There was a man on the scene who said he was a doctor.
Can I go check a pulse?
No! Back up! Now!
I'm a physician!
I don't care. We understand. We got EMS coming. I get it. Just give us a second. We have medics on scene. We have our own medics.
Where are they? Where are they?
So the doctor wasn't allowed to see Renee Good. Louis, you were on the scene.
There weren't any signs, it appeared, of any medics going to check on her.
After Renee Good was shot and killed, we know that there have been dramatically different interpretations of what happened. Kristi Noem, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, was at a press conference, and here is what she said.
You asked about a shooting that we just had in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was an act of domestic terrorism. What happened was our ICE officers were out in an enforcement action. They got stuck in the snow because of the adverse weather that is in Minneapolis. They were attempting to push out their vehicle, and a woman attacked them and those surrounding them and attempted to run them over and ram them with her vehicle. An officer of ours acted quickly and defensively shot to protect himself and the people around him. And my understanding is that she was hit and is deceased. We're continuing to gather more information, but this goes to show the assaults that our ICE officers and our law enforcement are under every single day. These vehicle rammings are domestic acts of terrorism. We're working with the Department of Justice to prosecute them as such. We will continue to protect our ICE officers and in cooperation with other law enforcement agencies as well. You've seen me in the last couple of days deploy over 2,000 more officers to the Minneapolis area. And in the last 2 days, we've arrested hundreds and hundreds of dangerous criminals, not just fraudsters who stole from the American people.
She goes on to talk about fraud, but I want to focus on her words specifically about the shooting. How does Kristi Noem's report of the incident compare or jive with the people on the scene?
That account is strongly contested by every bystander I've spoken to. And I think that's the same with my colleagues. I mean, people are saying that she was there and identified by Keith Ellison as being a legal observer, also identified by her wife as being an observer who came because she was concerned for her neighbors.
Every single bystander that we have spoken to who live on that street and were outside in their yard or watching from their window just feet away roundly reject that characterization of the shooting.
What do they say?
They say that it's clear that she was getting conflicting direction.
Yeah.
Some agents, they say, were telling her to move. Some agents were telling her to get the F out of the car. So every person we've spoken to believes that she was a woman who was fearful, who was attempting to flee, but that she had no malice, that she was not attempting to run down an agent. So what this really comes down to is whether the agent had the legal authority and feared enough for his life that it's a justified use of force. And that will maybe play out depending on how this goes and who has jurisdiction. Now, the federal government is saying that, and that the officer is contesting that he was hospitalized, that he was injured. The president said he was run over. Video evidence does not suggest that.
He clearly walks away in the video.
And the video shows that at least 2 of those shots were fired after his body was clear
Out of the way
of the vehicle. It's not clear from the angles I've seen whether he was grazed or touched in some way. So that part is not clear, but he was not run over in that capacity. The video clearly shows him walking away from the scene right after the shooting, and he does not appear injured.
And there's also been some swirls that she was trying to block ICE vehicles with her car, but you can see in several videos that she is parked and her car is stopped and it's angled a little horizontally. And there is actually an ICE vehicle that drives and navigates right past her down the street seconds before this happens. I think that shows that is something that's also being contested by video evidence itself.
But I mean, to put a finer point on this, that's a fatality. And the Department of Homeland Security came out immediately and made comments about the justification of this case, when meanwhile, several senior DHS officials are telling national media, I'm not sure we should have done that on an open investigation.
Let's talk about this investigation for a minute, because local and state officials wanted to be part of that, but the federal government has taken it over. And now I understand local officials are going to run a separate second investigation.
The FBI is handling it, which is, people fear they are bigfooting our local authorities here. But to be clear, I just wanted to say that the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, our state agency, investigates all lethal police encounters in this state. They don't allow the local agencies involved in the critical incidents to do that themselves anymore for obvious reasons. They investigate the case, and then they submit their case file to the local county attorney for wherever those incidents occurred. That is not how it's going to go now. The FBI has said we will not share information with you. But the Hennepin County attorney came out with our state attorney general, Keith Ellison, and said we will conduct our own independent investigation. But they will not have access to the same evidence.
That's what I was going to ask.
Like the car.
Right.
The vehicle
locked
is
out.
not in state authorities' custody right now.
So they don't have access to the evidence, but they're going to try and...
Based on the autopsy and the videos, yes.
But yeah, initially it was going to be both the BCA and the FBI, and then the federal government turned them away and pretty much said, we will not work with the state on this investigation.
I was wondering why they weren't going to cooperate. But then I saw a statement from Kristi Noem saying state and local officials don't have jurisdiction. Now, I haven't heard more than that, and, I hope we'll get some more details over the coming weeks about how this investigation is going to go. Now, one of the people at the center of the investigation is, of course, ICE agent Jonathan Ross. Liz, tell us about him.
Actually, the Star Tribune broke the story about identifying the agent involved in Renee Good's killing. We found out who he was actually because of Secretary Kristi Noem. She said the very first day that this particular officer had been involved in a previous dragging incident last summer, though we didn't know where it was. She didn't give a location. I got a tip that it was local, that it was an incident in Bloomington. They were attempting to arrest a guy with a pretty lengthy criminal history who was in the country illegally. During the arrest, this agent, Jonathan Ross, was attempting to reach into the vehicle, and then the guy took off. And he had pretty extensive injuries, 33 stitches, and the pictures from the hospital are not great. But because we were able to identify this case, which DHS verified, we went back through the court file, and the court file very clearly lists the agent's name as Jonathan Ross. He's listed on the witness list. His photos are from the hospital are in evidence. And so once we were able to put that together, then I had a source verify that it was in fact the same guy. And so we wrote a story identifying him by name. He's a 43-year-old agent who's been with ICE for 10 years.
Does he live local?
He does. He lives in the greater Twin Cities area. We have not said his city. People are very upset that we've named him. His name was always going to come out eventually. And I want to make this point very clear because people are using the word dox very liberally around here. They're upset that the media have named him. But in Minnesota, under state law, any local police officer involved in a critical incident, like a fatality, their name is required to become public under the Data Practices Act. And it's usually put out by the BCA within a number of days. And they're placed on immediate administrative leave while the investigation is ongoing. That's not the case with the federal government. We have no idea whether this agent is placed on leave. We don't know what his status is. And we don't know if they would have ever publicly released his name. We've asked that question, and they said that they didn't intend to. And so we felt that it was newsworthy to do so, to treat him just like any other law enforcement agent involved in a situation like this.
And what happens next, we'll find out.
Yeah, that's right.
So 3 stories, 3 months in a nutshell. But we know that there is more coming. There are more federal agents coming to Minnesota. I saw that reported in CNN and the New York Times and other places. Governor Walz has just activated the National Guard. We'll see what they get up to. And of course, all the while, arrests continue to happen. Protests are ramping up, not just here, but around the country in response to Renee Good's death. So to wrap up our conversation, I want to ask you, what's your overall reflection? Sophia?
It's a heavy feeling. It seems to be a heavy feeling. I mean, there have been vigils because of what happened to Renee. People are just so upset. And I think people are terrified. I mean, so many people are carrying their documents with them all of the time. Citizens carrying their documents with them all of the time, as we've seen, as we've reported. I think also a lot of people are really traumatized, like long-term Minneapolis residents remember 2020. That is something that I've heard from even other journalists at a press conference. I heard someone say, I really don't want to see my city on fire again. I think people are concerned about what this means moving forward. And is this the tipping point? Is this the thing that's going to incite something else? Is this the first moment of something much larger?
That is what I've heard. Like, they want to incite a protester to go bananas. Are you hearing that?
There's been repeated calls for calm by our elected officials, both the mayor and the governor especially. There was an incident the other day. It didn't make a lot of the media, but it was on social. A white man at the memorial site attempted to burn an American flag, and some black protesters intervened, and they said, "What are you doing?" And actually, they accused him of being like an undercover officer attempting to incite something. And we don't know who he was, to be clear, but they intervened and they said, "You know what? We're not doing that here." And I thought that was really an important moment because there's been very minor property damage. We saw a broken window at the federal courthouse the other day. We saw some graffiti tagging. But people, I think, are really trying to temper the mood, temper the anger, and say, let's be organized and intentional about what our demands are, but let's be peaceful. And I hope that that is how it remains.
Thank you so much for the work you're doing to try and get the facts. And thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm Melissa Townsend, and that was Liz Sawyer, Louis Krause, and Sophia Burnett. Have a good day.